Dawn crept across the prairie like a shy confession, soft and silver, touching every blade of frost-kissed grass, as though afraid it might break. The world fell hushed, waiting. Even the wind held its breath, and in that stillness stood a giant of a horse, ghost gray, broad-shouldered, a creature carved from river stone and old stories. Folks in town called him Elder Wind, partly for his gentleness, partly for the strange way he seemed to sense things before anyone else did. This morning, his ears pricked sharply. Something in the wind trembled, a thin, broken sound, like a human moan tangled in pine needles. Elder Wind turned, nostrils flaring, hooves whispering over frozen ground as he moved toward the dark rows of pines lining the ridge. The moment felt heavy, prophetic, as if the land itself were trying to warn him. Through the trees, a shape swung awkwardly, boots first, body limp. A woman hung upside down from a snapped branch, her belt tangled in the splintered wood. Her hat lay far below, dust gathering around it like time settling upon a forgotten place. Ranger Alara Boone, brave, quiet-eyed, always carrying more silence than anyone her age should, was barely conscious, her fingers stiff from the cold and her breath shallow. Her blurred mind tried to stitch memory and present together. She saw the outlaw's smug smile, the snap of the hidden rope trap, the sudden sky flipping. Then laughter echoing off canyon walls, cruel, casual, fading as she dangled helplessly. A warm muzzle nudged her shoulder. She groaned. The world spun. The blood rushing to her head made everything dizzy, but that gentle pressure kept returning, steady, grounding her. When she forced her eyes open, she saw only a massive gray shape, eyes dark and calm, watching her with something strangely close to concern. "Easy," she whispered, though she didn't know if it was to him or herself. Elder Wind shifted his weight, pushing his shoulder beneath her. With surprising patience, he braced her body just enough for her to claw at the branch, free her belt, and drop, half falling, half sliding, onto the horse's solid flank. She slid to the ground in a heap, coughing, dizzy alive. It took her several breaths before she could stand. When she turned toward town, the great horse simply walked beside her, as if he had decided something important without needing permission. Alara had hoped to slip quietly into town before gossip had its breakfast, but hopes like that rarely survive long in a place like Thornbrush. Before she made it past the first hitching post, whispers gathered behind her like dust devils. That her. Hung herself in a tree, they say. Heard she went after that outlaw alone. Foolish. Rangers should know better. She kept her chin lifted, though her heart stung sharp. Thornbrush had a way of biting those who already bled. Near the sheriff's office, Rowan Cutter stepped out, lean, brittle, wearing the kind of pride that cracks under its own weight. "Heard you got yourself caught, like a turkey on Christmas," he said, his voice loud enough for every ear nearby. Alara stiffened. "Outlaw Jed Murdoch set a hidden snare. I tracked him too close to the cliffs. Or maybe you walked into it, because you ain't half as sharp as you think." He smirked. "A ranger worth her badge don't get hung upside down like laundry." Laughter, low and mean, rippled from a few porch loungers. Her throat burned. Shame sat heavy under her ribs, a familiar ache. She kept her hands still at her sides, so folks wouldn't see them trembling. Maeve Doolin, the saloon owner, stepped out with a bucket of water. Her voice was soft, protective. "Girl just survived being strangled by a tree branch. Give her a moment to breathe." Cutter ignored her. Elder Wind nudged Alara's shoulder, sensing her hurt. The townsfolk stepped back. Even Cutter quieted for a beat. There was something unsettling about such a large, wild horse standing guard over a ranger no one bothered to defend. That's when Marshal Cyrus Hale arrived. He moved with quiet steps, his coat flaring slightly in the cool wind, his dark hair still wet from morning wash. His eyes, storm gray, steady, met Alara's, and something inside her unlocked painfully, like a door swollen from years of silence finally giving way. He didn't ask what happened. He simply looked at her wounds, then at Elder Wind, then back at her face with a depth that said he understood more than she had spoken. "You all right?" he asked, voice low. Alara nodded, though the truth trembled on her tongue. Cutter scoffed. "She's fine enough to spin stories." says Jed Murdoch, caught her up like a deer. Cyrus turned his head slowly toward Cutter, his voice dangerously soft. Then you should be hunting Murdoch, not heckling the person he tried to kill. Cutter's jaw clicked shut. Cyrus stepped closer to Alara. Walk with me, he said gently. They moved through town together, the noise fading behind them. Elder Wind followed without being asked, his massive hooves thudding soft rhythms in the dust. Cyrus waited until they reached the quiet stretch near the river before speaking again. You don't have to carry their words on your back, he murmured. I wasn't careful, she said. They're not wrong. Everyone makes missteps, he replied, but not everyone survives them. He handed her his coat without hesitation. Here, you're shivering. She pulled it around her shoulders, warm not just by its fabric, but by the fact that someone, finally, believed her without question. Thank you, she whispered. For the coat. For listening. A small smile touched his mouth, not flirtation, just kindness. It was the sort of smile a man uses when he is careful with the hearts of others. They reached the bend of the river where she usually camped. She stopped, unsure how to ask him to stay, unsure if she should. Words tangled, so she said nothing. Cyrus placed a hand lightly on Elderwind's neck. This horse chose you, he said. Don't take that lightly. Before she could reply, he turned back toward town, leaving her with a fire ash-cold inside but warming. Night draped itself across the plains. Alara didn't return to town. The shame Cutter planted still clung to her skin, a burr that wouldn't shake loose. She set up camp beneath a cottonwood near the river, the ground hard but familiar. Elder Wind stayed close, lying down a few feet from the fire's glow. His presence steadied her, like an anchor in a storm. The wind shifted, carrying something thin and eerie, a distant whistle she recognized instantly. Jed Murdoch's call. Her breath hitched. The fire cracked. Elder Wind's ears flicked sharply. Somewhere beyond the tree-line, something moved. Something dangerous. Something unfinished. Alara gripped the butt of her pistol, the old shame melting slowly into cold, sharpened dread. And in that dark, watchful silence, the promise of a reckoning took shape. The whistle came again, thin as a blade, cold as creek ice in winter. Alara rose slowly from her bedroll, boots whispering against dry leaves. Elder Wind stood before she did, his hulking body turning toward the shadows with a quiet, simmering warning rumble. The moon struggled behind thin clouds, spilling only enough light to outline the pines. Alara's pulse thudded painfully in her ears. She thought she'd outrun the humiliation of the day, but the night had brought something far more dangerous than gossip. A twig cracked. Evening, Ranger, a voice drawled from between the trees. Nice of you to camp alone. Makes my job easier. Jed Murdoch stepped into the faint moonshine, his grin crooked, his revolver dangling casually at his side. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at something already bleeding. You left me hangin', Alara said, voice low. He laughed. You were the one hangin'. I just helped nature along. Her stomach twisted. Elder Wind pawed the earth, massive shoulders coiling like a storm about to break. Murdoch raised his pistol. Before he could fire, Elder Wind lunged. The ground shook with the force of it. Murdoch cursed, stumbling back as the giant horse barreled toward him with a sound like thunder, trapped in a canyon. His shot fired wide, sparks jumping off a rock behind Alara. Elder Wind's hose pounded dangerously close to Murdoch's hands, sending him scrambling into the dark. This ain't over, Boone, he shouted, breathless. Next time, I'll make sure you don't come down alive. His voice vanished into the forest, swallowed by distance and branches. Alara's knees gave way. She caught herself against Elder Wind's flank, chest heaving. Thank you, she whispered into his warm hide. The horse exhaled as though accepting, as though acknowledging her fear without judgment. When dawn arrived, soft and amber, Cyrus Hale rode into camp. He saw the trampled ground, the shaken ranger, the flecks of spent gunpowder on her sleeves. He said nothing at first, just dismounted, walked to her, and knelt gently to look her in the eyes. What happened? He asked, though he already understood too much from the set of her jaw. She told him, voice quiet, leaving out nothing. He listened with stillness, the kind that made her feel seen rather than interrogated. When she finished, Cyrus simply nodded and handed her a piece of bread. Eat, he said softly. Can't track a man on an empty stomach. She managed a small breath of laughter, thin but real. They shared breakfast in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward or cold, but warm, two people understanding each other through presence alone. Elder Wind stood behind them like a silent sentinel. By midday, they rode into thornbrush again. Word of the night's attack had already sprouted wings. Cutter stood in the middle of the street, arms crossed, waiting like a vulture that smelled fresh weakness. Alara Boone, he said loudly, I hear tell you're stirring up trouble again. Cyrus's voice cut sharply across the street. The trouble is an outlaw who tried to kill her, twice. Some townsfolk shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet Alara's eyes. Others spoke in whispers, the kind meant to slice the air and the spirit. Maybe she's chasing shadows. She just wants attention. She ain't half the ranger she claims. Alara felt her cheeks burn, not from shame anymore, but from a swelling pressure, anger, exhaustion, a tightening inside her chest that begged not to break. And then Elder Wind stepped forward, placing his enormous body between her and the whispering crowd. His presence forced the street into sudden hush. Cyrus watched her quietly, admiration glimmering in his storm-colored eyes. You don't owe them your shame, he murmured. But you do owe yourself your dignity. Her throat thickened. She tried to answer, but no sound came. Later, just as the sun hung low over the rooftops, a small girl tugged at Alara's sleeve. Lark, the orphan who slept behind the saloon's woodpile. Miss Boone, the child whispered. I saw the outlaw, the one with the black hat and ugly laugh. He was by the river cliffs. He said he was waiting for you. Alara knelt, pressing her hands gently over the girl's small ones. Thank you, Lark. That's brave of you to tell me. The girl nodded. Be careful. He looked meaner than a snake stuck in a bucket. Alara stood, heart steadying. Cyrus was already watching her. We're going, he said. She nodded. They rode out at dusk, the sky bruised purple and gold, the air thick with that heavy silence before something irrevocable happens. Elder Wind led with an urgency neither of them questioned, guided by instinct, by loyalty, by something older than fear. The river cliffs rose steeply ahead, the water below churning with winter melt. Jed Murdoch stepped out from behind a boulder, rifle raised, smile venomous. Well, look at that, he sneered. The upside-down ranger and her pet marshal. Cyrus moved before Alara could warn him. The shot cracked. The bullet grazed Cyrus's shoulder, spinning him backward. He hit the ground hard, breath torn from his chest. Alara cried out, instinct dragging her toward him. Murdoch's laugh echoed off the cliffs. One down, one to go. He advanced on her, gun aimed steady. Fear collapsed her breath. Her legs wouldn't respond. Her hands felt numb. Then Elder Wind screamed. The giant horse surged between them like a force of nature, hooves striking sparks from the rocky ground. Murdoch stumbled, thrown off balance. Alara moved. Her fear didn't vanish. It transformed. Hardened. Focused. She lunged forward, grabbing Murdoch's arm with both hands. He cursed, twisting, trying to shove her toward the cliff edge just as he had before, repeating his cruelty as if fate belonged to him. But she found her footing. She found herself, and in a single desperate movement, she wrenched the gun from his grip. You won't hang me again, she whispered. Not today. Not ever. Elder Wind struck Murdoch's legs out from beneath him. He hit the ground, dazed. Cyrus, despite the pain, forced himself upright and snapped the outlaw's hands into irons. The adrenaline hit Alara all at once. Her breath trembled. Her hands shook violently. Cyrus reached her, blood staining his shirt. He placed a hand on her cheek, a touch not passionate, not bold, but reverent. You saw clear, Alara, he said softly. You always did. You just needed someone to stand beside you while you did. Her eyes stung. She leaned into his hand without thinking, the gesture small, but carrying the weight of every unspoken feeling. Together, they led the outlaw back to town. Thornbrush fell silent when they rode in. Murdoch in chains, Alara upright and steady, Cyrus wounded but resolute, Elder Wind towering above them like a guardian card from legend. Cutter swallowed his pride. Looks like I misjudged you, Boone. Alara didn't answer. For the first time, she didn't need validation. She had already reclaimed her worth on the cliffside. People watched her with widened eyes, not whispering now, but humbled. That night, Cyrus walked her to her cabin. Lantern light warmed their faces. The world felt quiet, softened by victory and something sweeter. They stood close, not touching at first, listening to the way the night breathed around them. Cyrus's voice was a fragile whisper. "If you want company, I can stay a while." She reached for his hand, not pulling, just holding. "You already did," she said. "More than you know." He leaned his forehead gently against hers. No promises, no declarations, just presence, steady as the river beside them, warm as firelight on a winter night. Elder Wind grazed nearby, lifting his head to watch them, keeper of a story that would be told for years. And now, reader, this is the part meant for you. Sometimes the world hangs you upside down, makes a spectacle of your mistakes, lets the wrong voices drown out your own. But remember Ranger Alarabun. Remember the giant horse who refused to leave her to the dark. Sometimes salvation isn't loud. It arrives on quiet hooves, in the shape of someone who chooses you when others turn away. And if you ever find yourself caught in the branches of doubt or shame, may you have the courage to cut yourself free, stand tall again, and walk toward the life waiting for your bravery.